We'll teach you guys how to do this. Sit back here and do anything with it? Dave's got the clicker. Okay. Thanks anyway. We'll teach you guys how to do it. Yes, I know a lot of the songs. Joyce knows I know a lot of them. I hadn't been saved long, and a men's group from BBC came to our church in St. Louis and sang. And this was one of the first songs I heard a group like that sing, the Solid Rock. I still remember it. That's been a long time ago, 52 years ago. That's been a long time ago, but I remember that. And then Brother Green, of course I went to BBC and knew him, he told the guys, said, introduce yourselves. They all shook hands and said hi already. But that was one of the first songs from a group that I heard sang, and I still remember that. Jesus Christ, the Solid Rock. Chapter 20, Chapter 20 of verse Genesis. Genesis chapter 20, we're going to read verses 1 through 18. The last couple of weeks, those of you who weren't here last week, you missed the one about Lot, about all the going on with them. And now, let's read our verses and then we'll go, because we got to hear the story before we see what is going on.
And Abraham journeyed from thence toward the south country, and dwelt between Kadesh and Shur, and sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah his wife, She is my sister. And Abimelech king of Gerar sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night, and said to him, Behold, thou art but a dead man, for the woman which thou hast taken, for she is a man's wife. But Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, Lord, wilt thou slay also a righteous nation? Said he not unto me, She is my sister? And she, even herself, said, He is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have I done this. And God said unto him in a dream, Yea, I know that thou didst this in the integrity of thy heart, for I also withheld thee from sinning against me. Therefore suffered I thee not to touch her. Now therefore restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet, and he shall pray for thee, and thou shalt live. And if thou restore her not, know thou that thou shalt surely die, thou and all that are thine. Therefore Abimelech rose early in the morning, and called all of his servants, and told all these things in their ears, and the men were sore afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham, and said unto him, What hast thou done unto us, and what have I offended thee, that thou hast brought on me and on thy kingdom a great sin? Thou hast done deeds unto me that ought not to be done. And Abimelech said unto Abraham, What sawest thou, that thou hast done this thing? And Abraham said, Because I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. And yet indeed she is my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And it came to pass, when God caused me to wander from my father's house, That I said unto her, This is thy kindness which thou shalt show unto me at every place whither we shall come. Say of me, He is my brother. And Abimelech took sheep and oxen and manservants and womenservants, and gave them unto Abraham, and restored him Sarah his wife. And Abimelech said, Behold, my land is before thee, dwell where it pleaseth thee. And unto Sarah he said, Behold, I have given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he is to thee a covering of the eyes unto all that are with thee, and with all other. Thus she was reproved. So Abraham prayed unto God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his manservants, and they bare children. For the Lord had fast closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech, because Sarah, Abraham's wife.
All right. Sin. Is it ever okay to tell a lie? Is it ever okay to tell a lie? Raise your hand if you've ever done it. Once a day? Nah. What do we call a little lie? We say it's a little, to justify ourselves, we say it's a little white lie. Well, it's okay. I'll tell part of the truth. Lady used to come to church here. Like you met her at the bank, and she came to church for several years, and her mom died, and had her mom's funeral here, and she quit coming after that. Anyway, she would tell you enough of a story to make you believe it, but she wouldn't tell you the whole truth. And then later, she might tell you something else, and she might tell you something else. But she embellished the story over here a little bit to make herself look good, or whatever the situation was, but she didn't let you have the truth, as they say on TV, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So this chapter opens with the statement that Abraham, continued his journey. I didn't check to see how far it was, but, he's traveled. God's got a plan for him. He's told him to go, and I'll let you know when you can stop. But his scheming and his sin, of course, we could all point our finger at him. We could say, shame on you, Abraham. How many fingers are pointing back at us? We got 3 pointing back at us. We could say that. By the way, pray for Sylvia. She's had a bad week, and she's not feeling good at all, so keep her in your prayers too. Just saw Karen shaking her head, and I thought of Sylvia. She brought her this morning, so pray for Sylvia too. So we see that this scheming, these things we saw a couple weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, that Sarah laughed at God. That's basically saying, well, yeah, you're not in charge. You don't know what the whole truth is. You can't do what you say. I told you there's been times in my life, my Christian life, that I doubted what God was going to do. And God slapped me upside the head and said, you want me to prove it? Yes, I know I'm from Missouri. And they'll always like to rub that in. They said that's the show me state because they're stubborn. I've been in Indiana longer than anywhere else I've lived. I've lived in Missouri, Illinois, and Ohio, and Indiana. 4 states in a row. I've been to a lot of counting last night the states. I've been to 36 states. I guess that's not, I didn't realize that, so I started counting them. But I've lived in 4 states, Missouri, Illinois. Illinois was just a short time when I was a kid, but we did live across the river, and then I lived in Indiana, and I lived in Ohio for a couple of years. So 4 states in a row. Been across there. I lived here longer. There's some stubborn people in this state too. Raise your hand if you know somebody that's stubborn. Raise your other hand if it's you. Sin. Lying. So there's only 3 slides. Hey, there's only 3 slides. There's only 3 slides this week. We usually have a lot more, but Dave, go ahead and change the first one there. Dave's got that clicker, and then Jake, thank you, Jake. He came back and said, can I do anything? Believers do sin, verses 1 and 2. Abraham deceived Abimelech. Now, it's not the best thing to deceive a king or a leader. Because back in those days, everything that I know and read of and hear of, even if you just lied to a king, they could just do this little slight thing called cut your head off, put you in prison, throw you in jail. Back then, the jails weren't cush jails like they have now with hot meals and everything else. Most of the time, from what I understand in Bible history, they were caves, dungeons. They weren't these places, you know, you can imagine being in a dungeon where Paul and Silas were, but you can imagine where Joseph was. There's going to be critters crawling around. There's probably going to be water. There's going to be mold. Probably no light. You get the picture. So the king could have done anything, but here he is. He's going to try to save his own neck again. But he resorts to the same tactic that he had in Egypt. In Genesis 12:13, say, I pray thee, thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake. Well, here he is, this lie. Now, I get that if you, on the scheme of sins, if you want to take sins, different things, we say murder is worse than lying. Am I right? In our minds, we say, well, you murder somebody's got to be worse than telling a lie. But when God says sin is sin, is it any different? To God, is a lie any bigger than a murder? Yes, we put grades on them. You're supposed to get, the harder the sin, the more heinous the sin, the more heinous the crime, you get a different punishment. I get that. You should spend a lot more time in jail if you murder somebody than if you just told a lie or if you just stole something. It's been years ago, probably 25 years ago. Time goes by so fast. Here in Bloomington, some guy, that was when they were doing 3 strikes and you're out. Some guy stole something for the 3rd time. I get it, and it's not right. I'm not saying he's okay. But they put him in jail. They said 3 strikes and you're out. The guy had to go to jail. But then just around that time, somebody murdered, something happened, I don't remember what happened. They got 2 years in jail. I thought, man, for killing somebody, you surely should. In my opinion, if you kill somebody, you should never get out of jail. But that's my opinion. So Pharaoh took Sarah to be his wife, back in Egypt, and this, here he is lying again. This brought the judgment of God on Pharaoh's household. So the next thing here is Abimelech is the king, took Sarah to be his wife. Now, back in Bible times, the kings had, you might as well use the word harem. They had many wives. It wasn't right. How many wives did Solomon have? They say he was the wisest man in the world. 700 wives and 300 concubines. That's 7 and 3. That's 1,000 women. I go in the store, stop. Mike goes down there a lot, down to the marathon. Karen goes in there. We've all been in there at the same time before, getting a drink. Joyce goes down there, and the girls have been friends. And Becky, we took them a treat bag for Christmas, and they're all polite, and they're friends. They've known them for years. A couple of them come to the pantry and did different things, but always give them a hard time. And I said, you want my money? So my wife wants my money. My granddaughters want my money. So all the women want my money. It just works out that way, When we were younger, the boys wanted my money. But 1,000 wives. 700, he's supposed to have been wise. But back in that time, it wasn't okay, but they did it. It wasn't okay for Solomon to take 700 wives. What happened with the kingdom? All these wives brought in all their cultures and all their ideas and all their religions and all that other stuff. We talked about it Wednesday night when God put his people in the promised land. Becky said it Wednesday night, but what did God tell him to do with all the people in the promised land when they went? Somebody tell me. Kill them! I know that's strict. I know that's hard. But God said to do it. Did they do it? No. Then they intermarried. Once again, they brought their religions and all this other stuff. So, just for the picture, for the cause, it was okay. I'm going to tell you, if my wife was here, I would tell you, 1 wife's enough. All the men here would probably say, I'm not even going to ask Troy, he'll get in trouble. But 1 wife is enough, not just at a time, one's enough. And the women are going to say the same thing. Women are going to say, one man's enough. Becky said, if I ever die, she's never going to marry anybody. I said, you'll find a rich lawyer to probably marry him. She said, no, I won't ever marry again. She said, I'm not going to do that. She said, no, and she's just not going to do it. Some people don't have a problem with that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But Abimelech, the king, as we said, took Sarah's wife. So it was the custom, like we said, for the king to take, any single woman and that pleased him, that he thought was pretty or whatever things about these ladies they could take, the king had a right to take them. That was just their custom. Didn't make it right in God's eyes, but that's what they did. Just like today, they do all kinds of things that are sin. They say it's okay. We won't even get into some of the stuff that's going on now. But even if they're old, so Abimelech had no idea that Sarah and Abraham were married. Why? Because they lied. Now back then, you didn't have papers. Back then, you didn't have birth certificates, I'm sure. It wasn't until, I think, the 20s or 30s or 40s, I read at one time, when the states started asking for marriage licenses. Back before then, and now the new Bibles, and mine does not have in it. I have an old Bible that does have it in it. But the old Bibles, as you know, had pages in the front to record marriages. Why? Because when a preacher married somebody, it was considered legal, and if it was there, it was a binding document. If his signature was written down, it was binding. But then the state said, hey, guess what? Let's tell them they have to have a marriage license only for one reason. What's that reason? The money. Driver's licenses. When Ryan was in Arizona, your driver's license, you didn't have to get a driver's license renewed for 30 years. Is it still 30, Karen? Do you know your brother lives up there? It's something like that. Her brother lives in Phoenix. And you don't have to do it. Why do they do it? Here we go again. Missouri was 4 years. Indiana 6 years. Why do they do it every 6 years? If you already know how to drive, you shouldn't have to pay a fee to keep driving. But the only reason they want it is because of the money. And it keeps going up. But back then they didn't have those paper things. They didn't fill out marriage licenses. So you had to take men's word. Leon said, I remember Leon saying he was one of those who went to a bank and got a loan. Didn't sign a paper. Stuck his hand out. The banker stuck his hand out, and they shook on it. But now what do? Pinky swear. Or what do we do with the kids? Blood brothers, blood sisters. But Leon said they shook on a loan. Now, go to the bank and ask if they'll shake on a loan and see what they say. They'll laugh you out of there. They would not do it. Now you got to fill out paperwork. You got to give your firstborn. You got to have collateral. All kinds of stuff. I told you we got a call the other day, and the lady said, "Oh, you want to sell your property at 1100?" I said, "I just hung up because our address is not 1100." But they called my brother one time and said, "You want to sell your house?" He said, "Yes, I'll take $1 million, but you got to take my wife too." Wanda was sitting there. She said, "What?" And he said, "You got to take my wife. I'll sell you my house." He probably gotten the calls. I'm getting at home. I got blockers on my phone. My cell phone don't get too many of those. Anyway, he was walking by sight and not by faith. Is there a difference to walk by sight and not faith versus walking by faith and not sight? Our faith has to be strong. That's what we're talking about. The whole thing with Abraham, we're learning from him. Secondly, believers sin. The result is suffering, verses 3 through 7. Now, we talked about this Wednesday night. Abraham, by telling a lie, he lost his character. If somebody lies to you enough, do you believe anything they say? No. I had an aunt that lied. I don't know why. She lied about she would watch something on the news. I love my Aunt Marty. I loved her to death. When I lived in St. Louis, I was there at her house all the time. I loved her to death. But she would, because I heard her, she would watch the news, and they'd say, "We're going to get 2 inches of snow." And 10 minutes later, she would be on the phone to a friend and say, "They just said on the news we're not getting any snow." I don't know why. Yes, she did things like, the one thing I remember, she would, how many of you had a percolator coffee pot? How many of you know what those are? My brother dumped one over on him one time, pulled the cord. He was about 4 years old, spilled one on him. She went in the kitchen, I was over there, we were watching TV, and she went in and made coffee. I didn't drink, I was 14, I didn't drink coffee then. Don't drink a whole lot now. But she goes in, makes the coffee. She goes back 10 minutes later, she yells from the kitchen, I can't find the coffee pot. Anybody else ever done that? She comes back laughing. She put that, they had a stem on them. If you ever saw what a percolator was, they had a little basket there. You dump the grounds in it, shot hot water up to the middle, water went into the stem, went down the pot, and plug it in. She did all the coffee grounds, and she set the coffee percolator in the refrigerator. It didn't get hot! She was laughing. We've all done that, but I don't know why. If I called my brother right now and asked, did Aunt Marty ever tell you lies? He would laugh. I don't know why she did that. Why do people do that? But once you tell somebody tells you lies enough, you're not going to believe them. So Abimelech, he's the one with integrity. Abraham is the deceiver and the liar. Now in my eyes, the next thing I have is Abraham lost his testimony. In my eyes, lying is, you just constantly lie about stuff. That gets pretty bad. You know the story. You keep laying bluff. You keep bluffing and bluffing, and then when something happens, and there is a fire, nobody's going to believe you. But Abraham's supposed to be following God. He's on this trek. He's moving. So how can he talk with, Abimelech or others about the God of truth? And that's the point. If you're around somebody and you lied all the time, guess what? And then you said, I'm a Christian. Let me tell you about God. It's like Billy Graham was in a town one time, and he said, he saw this little boy, and he said, can you tell me where the post office is? And the boy told him where the post office was. And Billy Graham said, I'm a preacher. If you like to come to church, I'll show you how to get to heaven. And you know what that little boy said? If you don't even know the way to the post office, how can you show me how to get to heaven? Kids take things literally. I didn't say how old he was, but it made Billy Graham think, you can't even find the post office. You're going to take me to heaven? So instead of being a source of blessing like we all need to be, no babies were born, as we read it, Genesis 20:18, for the Lord had fast closed all the wombs of the house of Abimelech. Wow. All of them. That's a pretty good punishment. So I ask if anybody lied, and everybody raise their hand. If God still did that, if he did that now, we'd be all in trouble. But there has to be some consequences for our sin. It catches up with it. So Abraham, what he did was, he tempted God. So when the child of God gets out of the will of God, the discipline of God usually follows. I'm not saying God's going to kill you. I'm not saying God's going to knock us dead or do whatever. The other day, my brother lives in Edwards County, down in Florida, in Polk County. The sheriff is like Joe Arpaio was in Arizona. Grady Judd puts up with absolutely NOTHING. He got word the other day that some of the protesters from south of Polk County were going to come up to Polk County and protest. He got on TV and he said, I advise you not to come. His exact words were, if you get in front of our cars and try to stop us, we will run over you dead. He pulls no punches. They asked him years ago, they shot a guy 28 times. And the news said, why did you shoot him 28 times? Do you know what Grady Judd said? because we ran out of bullets. He puts up with nothing. They love him down there. The rioters during 2020, when they were all doing all that all over the country, they didn't come to Polk County. They didn't stay very long. He puts up with nothing. He said, we will. He said, I've heard him. I've heard the videos. He said, if you come in our county and you point a gun at one of our officers, he said, we will shoot you dead. He pulls no punches. We need some more sheriffs like that. You know, if we had more sheriffs like that, this stuff wouldn't be going on in our country. Anyway, they said Trump was going to destroy our country. Now the rioters are doing it. We wouldn't get into that. Look at this next slide. Sinning believers can be forgiven and restored. Now, because we can be forgiven doesn't give us a license to sin. I've had people tell me, you Baptists, you believe in eternal security. That means you can do anything you want and get away with it. Who said we're going to get away with it? If you're a born-again Christian, where are you going to have to stand someday? In front of the throne of God. But when we do serve God, let's take it real quickly before we finish this. On the opposite side, if we don't sin and we serve God, what does God do to us? He blesses us. He blesses us. We all have more than we deserve in our country. Abimelech confronts and rebukes Abraham, verses 8 through 10. So how embarrassing it is for Abraham, it must have been, just like I said, if we sinned, and then we tell somebody, let me tell you about Jesus. Now, there's not a perfect person, and we've talked about this so many times, there's not one perfect person in this building except me. No, I'm not. There's not a perfect person in this building. Downstairs, the kids, Becky, the teachers, us up here, there's not one perfect person. One day we'll get to heaven and we're going to be as perfect as we can be. That'll be glorious. I mean, things will be so different. Like I said, we'll have hair. We won't need glasses. We won't need hearing aids. We won't need surgery. We won't need any of this. To have an unsaved man rebuke you for what you have done, that's embarrassing to God. That's embarrassing to the Father. Yes, humans, we have feelings and we should be embarrassed if somebody caught us in something like that, but boy, to have an unsaved man make excuses. We're going through this with Randy. Everything we tell him, he's making excuses for everything. Keep praying for him. Abraham makes excuses for his sin, verses 11 through 13. He says it was because of his fear. Now, how big is fear? How many of you are afraid of something? I know what Jim's number one is. These things that crawl on the ground, called snakes. Jim does not like snakes. Now, Mike, he's not afraid of them. He pick them up. He'll do stuff. Now, I'm sure he probably wouldn't pick up a poisonous one. Mike had one. We're doing the awning back in 2000. Mike had one in a bucket in the truck, and Jim wouldn't go over there and look at it, and neither would Kerwin. Kerwin was the guy who used to come to church, and Kerwin wouldn't go off that ramp. And it was Mike's truck was parked over by the light pole. And Dale, we were standing there talking. They're talking about that snake, and Dale took his broom that he had in his hand and stuck it up there and hit Kerwin's ankle with it. Have you ever seen the Irish do a jig? By the way, you know why the Irish, they said how they created the jig? Is because they have 10 kids and they only had one bathroom, and that's what everybody danced around to get the bathroom. But Kerwin was doing a dance out here. He did. Scared the tar out of him. He thought that snake got out of that bucket, and he thought that snake done got him. We're all afraid of something. I told you, I've done 70 different roller coasters. I may get to ride another one, I may not. I may get on one, and I may get sicker than a dog. Who knows? If I get a chance to ride it, I'll try it. You know I'm crazy. But I don't like Ferris wheels. I just don't like being open and the thing swinging. I've heard things that have fallen. I never have. Even as a kid, 10, 12 years old, rode Ferris wheel. We lived in Ohio. And I didn't like it. I've been on one since then. We first moved here. We went to the fair. Me and Ryan got on the Ferris wheel. It wasn't real bad, but Ryan wanted to ride it. So we got on there, and then Randy went on, so the guy stopped, and Randy got on. We got up to the top, and they always stopped you at the top, let other people on. Randy was only less than 2 years old. He stood up in the seat. I didn't realize it. He just stood up in the seat before I could grab him. And Becky grabbed that guy down there and said, "That's my baby. You stop this thing and let me get him off." Usually they won't. That guy was afraid of Becky. He stopped at the bottom. Randy got off. He didn't want to get off, but I didn't want him standing up anymore either. That wasn't the place to do that. Anyway, Abraham makes excuses. Yeah, he's making excuses for things. We try to do that. So he then tries to convince Abimelech, as you read the story, that he really wasn't lying. She is my half-sister. We try to justify our sin. We try to say, well, it's okay. It's okay because of this situation. Like I said, fear is a big thing. There are people who are afraid of elevators. I told you a few years ago there was a lady in England I read, she was afraid to make a left turn. Every route she took, she sat down with a map and routed it out where she made all right turns. How do you become afraid of something like that? Who knows? Your brain does all kinds of weird things. Some people are afraid of some things. I have never seen my wife take one bite of shrimp in 47 years, 47 and a half years. She said, if it doesn't look good, it ain't touching these lips. She said, there's no way it tastes good. I said, you can't say that. Until you really taste it and say it doesn't taste good. There is one thing that doesn't taste good, and that's cottage cheese. We'll leave that alone. I told you that over and over and over. So, he's later seen praying for himself, and God answers his prayers. Wow. Now he's pleading for his people, which shows compassion, it shows integrity, it shows restoration, it shows forgiveness. Well, Lord, just because of me, I'm wrong, I did it, I'm sorry, but don't punish all, you're not going to surely punish the whole nation because of what I did. Surely you're not going to make them all suffer because of what I did. Imagine if God did that today, if when we sinned, he made everybody suffer. Only he knows what this would be like, what the world would be like. Yes, the Bible does say, things pass on. Sin passes on from one to the second, the third, and even to the fourth generations. But then it goes the other way too. People who serve the Lord goes to the first, the second, the third, fourth generations. We see that in our own church. Doris was a faithful churchgoer. Now her kids, 2 of them are here today. Her grandkids, they're here today. Her great-grandkids, on to the 4th generation, they're here because of one lady. Am I right, Sonny and Mike? They're here because of one lady, her faithfulness. Now you talk about stubborn. Mike and Sonny's dad. Was your dad stubborn, Mike? Only when he was awake? Yeah. He wanted things done. We had a dinner one time, and we traded these numbers, or we traded these things, and you might have got 3 spoons and 1 plate and no plate and 2 forks or whatever. And the whole idea was you got to go around trays so you could have a fork, spoon, and knife, and a plate and a cup. Well, we started at 10 after. I mean, that's when we got to start eating. And John came up and said, Rick, you said this was at 6 o'clock, not 10 after. John was stubborn, but they went for years to the cabin on the weekends, but he brought the family back on Sunday mornings so they go to church. He didn't have to do that. I know men that would have never done that. I know men that would have never, nope, you just suffer. But he brought them back, and they were able to come to church. So sin goes 4 generations, but also serving the Lord can do the same thing. They responded out of fear, not out of faith. Sarah was returned to Abraham along with presents. It says 1,000 pieces of silver. Now, I don't know what silver was worth back then. But the last thing is, Abraham was able to be a blessing to Abimelech after all. Well, instead of messing up in the middle, we learned from Abraham, let's not mess up. Now, none of us are perfect. We are going to sin. We are going to mess up. I've been giving tickets to 3 of the IU basketball games this year from Miss Crow, and my friend David's gone to 3 of them, and we've lost 2. We don't like that. The teams mess up. There's one team we don't want to mess up tomorrow night. Mrs. Crow's brother lives in Fort Wayne. He said they're all excited up there too. The Hoosier Nation's all over the place. We'll see what happens. It would be nice to win the national championship. They were handing out rally towels the other day in the cold. If you saw the video, the line at the Assembly Hall was a half a mile long to get 2 towels. I have 2 from 2 of the football games I went to, so guess who wasn't going to go stand in the cold? It was my wife's birthday anyway. I wasn't going to go stand in the cold. And they brought the camera from the back of the line just to show dedication. They brought the camera from the back of the line all the way up to the assembly line doors, and they hadn't opened the doors yet, so you can imagine how long those people in front were waiting before that half a mile long line stretched all the way around there. I didn't want that. I don't want something that bad.
Well, I was there.
Well, there are some crazy people in the world. Where are you at in the line? Middle? Back? Front?
Halfway.
Half? So you're in the middle.
Yeah.
How long did you wait?
Well, luckily I had somebody that waited an hour for me to get there. And I waited an hour and 30 minutes. So.
I thought there was something wrong with Troy, but that was that.
I was, you know.
Now, there's a lot of people. If it wasn't cold, I might have went and done it. But I have 2 from the year. But it's just something. A friend of ours, Becky, taught him when he was in 1st grade, which when she taught at Grace was in the 80s. He had 3 of them, and he's got a frame. He's got all 3 of them in a frame. Yeah, maybe part of history. Anyway, perhaps God included, this account in His Word, so that we won't become so self-righteous. Stories about Abraham, stories about Isaiah, which is Sunday school today, God's throne. Stories about Jeremiah, stories about Moses, stories about Noah, stories about Paul. They're not just stories that God said, okay, let's take this random story, we'll put this random story, this random story, this random story, we'll just make a random book out of it. No, God wants us to learn from them. I know you go through Deuteronomy, you go through Leviticus, and there's 700 names there, and you can't pronounce them, and I've asked before how many you skipped over, most of you raised your hand. I've done the same thing, but they're there for a reason. If we didn't have those names, we wouldn't have the genealogy of Jesus Christ. But God puts these stories in these for us to learn from. This is our textbook. This is our learning book. And God wrote it. So Heavenly Father, maybe somebody's watching by video today. And perhaps they're not saved. Touch their hearts, touch their minds. We're all sinners, but we're all saved by grace. There may be somebody, as far as I know, everyone in this room is a born-again Christian, but if there's anyone who is not, may they not leave these doors today without coming to me or someone else and saying, hey, can you show me how to be saved? I want to serve the Lord. I want the Lord on my side.